If you're ready for honest conversations on a variety of health topics and a return to the fundamentals of natural holistic healing, welcome. Grab your filtered water, get comfortable, and let's drop some truth.
Hello, everyone. We are getting so much conflicting information out there. Eat eggs. Don't ever eat eggs. Eggs cause high cholesterol. Eat just sardines all the time. Eat just vegetables all the time. Don't eat any meat. Don't eat any dairy. Don't eat anything else other than vegetables and fruit. Eat carnivore, eat meat all the time. There's so much conflicting information, and that's what we're going to dive into today on Truth Bombs and Tinctures. So I'm Dr. Robin Tauzin, and I'm a naturopathic doctor. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Aviva Wertkin, who's also a naturopathic doctor.
Hi, welcome back, everybody.
So what do we do? Everybody's big question is, what do I eat? Right? And we're online and we're reading everything we can to figure that out. And I will say there's not always an easy answer to that. Most of the information we're finding out there is very generalized. And unfortunately, that's not how diet works. So diet is different for every person. So the diet that I eat, I know, is very different from the diet that Dr. Wertkin eats. And it's probably different from the diet that you should eat. So you need to be able to work with somebody who can help you figure out what's right for you and your body, not just read online and do the biggest fad diet that's coming around. It has to be individualized for the person. So, for instance, I had a patient who was trying to lose weight, and she had a laundry list of health issues, and she heard you should be vegan, and so she did a vegan program. She did it for about 9 months with exercise and never lost 1 pound. And she came to see me crying because she had spent all this money and been doing the best diet that she's supposed to do to lose weight, and it's not working. And what did I do? I made her eat meat. And what happened? She started dropping weight after that. So you can't just go by what's out there. We have to go with what's right for you and your body. And there's quite a few different ways that we do go about that and look into that to figure that out. That's why I would definitely recommend working with somebody who can help you figure that out rather than try all these fad diets you're reading about online, like keto and vegan and carnivore and the sardine diet. Yeah, what would you like to add, Dr.
Yes,
Wertkin?
I want to add because I've also, right, I think it's so easy and understandable that people want to research and figure out how should I eat to lose weight or how should I eat to feel better? These are very common, understandable questions. And I was giggling to myself when you gave that example with the patient because I've also had to do that and both. I've had people who come in who are eating a high protein, high meat diet and they can't lose weight and they're doing tons of cardio all the time for them, I might say, you actually need to go on a vegetarian or vegan diet for a little while. And what many people aren't understanding is the shift in the diet has to do with recreating balance. And so there are some times when people are eating in such a way that it's keeping their cortisol levels way too high, and that's going to sabotage their weight goals. Other times people have a different metabolic imbalance going on where they need to eat a lot less carbs and vegetables and need to eat a lot more animal protein. And this is part of why Dr. Tauzin and I are going to go over different aspects of fad diets and common diets to help bust some myths on these topics and help you guys understand that it really is so important to determine what's the best diet for you right now. And then what's going to be a healthy, balanced diet long term. So we really can use food as medicine and food for our health goals. But we often get so rigidly attached to this is the way that I have to eat. And especially when somebody let's say they switch to keto and they feel so much better And then they think, I need to stay on this ketogenic diet for the rest of my life. And they don't realize that there's actually harmful aspects to staying on that diet for many people long term. And for some people, even short term. So maybe we should dive into that a little bit more if you'd like to talk about some of the pros and cons to that. Is that something you want to go over?
Absolutely. So with keto diet, that can end up really having a bad effect on the liver when people are on that for long term. And yes, sometimes you may want to do it for short term for a certain reason, but long term, it's not sustainable, right? Just like the carnivore diet. That's the big popular diet right now. Everybody wants to do the carnivore diet. And I will tell you, when you're eating high protein like that for a long period of time, there's definitely a lot of destruction happening. It's going to deplete your minerals, and it can hurt your kidneys because you're eating so much protein. I mean, I see so many people on that protein bandwagon, like 30, 40 grams of protein per meal. I'm like, that's ridiculous. But I have seen patients who, working with a physical trainer, eating nonstop protein, and then their kidneys start going into chronic kidney failure. And that's not something that's helpful. Um, I know there was an influencer online. Her name was, she was called Carnivore Yogi because she started doing carnivore and felt so great and she was having all these great results. And so she started having this huge following online and telling everybody, you need to eat carnivore, you need to eat carnivore. And so all these people were doing carnivore. She ended up getting severely ill because she was on this for a long term, a year or two, and she got severely ill from depleting all her minerals and, messing things up in her body. And so she had to come back out and change her name. So she changed her name, got rid of carnivore yogi, and started, uh, you know, uh, advocating other diets. And of course, a lot of her followers got upset because they're like, you've been telling us to eat carnivore. So that's why you really need to be careful with some of these diets. And vegan can be great for a lot of people, and it can be great to really heal your body. But also in the long term, it can cause problems for a lot of people. It can cause depletion of a lot of, B12 and different things like that. It's very confusing because you do have people saying, do this, do that, do this. Yeah, you will feel better with a lot of these diets right at the beginning when you first start doing them. Right? And a big reason for that is because you're taking out all the junk. And when you start taking out the junk, that inflammation starts coming down.
And I want to be clear, we're not anti any of these diets
Right.
whatsoever. It's helping people to understand that it's not a one size fits all. And
Yes.
again, just as Dr. Tauzin is saying, you see an influencer and then, people are so convincing on the internet. And there are many times when it comes to different health things where I'll see an influencer with something and I'll start to get pulled in. And then I remember what I actually know. And then I'm grateful for the knowledge and background I have to not get, let's say, suckered into something. But I can understand why it's so easy to believe and go, oh, that's what I need. And, people can also get on a roller coaster with different diets and they obsess in a way and they go all into an extreme diet. They feel better initially, then they feel worse and they keep jumping because they haven't figured out that they need to follow a diet that's specific for their body needs. And our body needs also change all the time. And it depends on what's going on. If somebody has a bacterial overgrowth in their gut, they may need to follow a certain diet for a period of time to help with that versus someone who has a yeast overgrowth or severe mold toxicity. You're going to want to modify your diet to lower your body burden and decrease your exposure to the foods that are going to worsen that condition. But it doesn't mean that you should then stay on that diet for the rest of your life. So those are, a couple of examples of how we might modify short term. There are other reasons that we might need to modify, and that can get into a whole other part of this conversation. One of the foods and food groups that comes up a lot that I see is people being afraid to eat fruit. And the most common reason I hear is that fruit is high in sugar and they don't want to gain weight or they're afraid that, they're insulin resistant, they have diabetes, and they've been taught to avoid fruit. but they will then also eat ice cream and candy bars and other processed foods high in sugar, but avoid the fruit. And I think fruit has gotten a really unfortunate bad reputation that is not founded in truth. And fruit is not the same, fructose from fruit is not the same as glucose. And that fructose, that fruit sugar, does not need to get into the cells through insulin. So it's not going to spike your blood sugar and insulin the way sugar or simple carbs can. And I have found fruit to be tremendously beneficial for people's health. And especially when I've had some patients who have blood sugar issues, I ask them to eat more fruit. And in particular, fruit by itself, not fruit with a meal. So you don't want to combine it with protein and fats, just fruit on its own, which again, I just want to reassure the people that are like, I can't do that. My blood sugar will spike and crash. It generally won't. For most people, it helps to regulate their blood sugar and helps them lose weight. And in part because it's also helping your lymphatic system to work more effectively, which is a whole other thing we can get into. So unless you're intolerant to fruit, if you don't have a fruit intolerance, most people can tolerate fruit. And you might have an allergy to certain fruits or a sensitivity or an intolerance. So I think we should talk about that a little bit because this applies to fruit, but it can apply to all the food groups. And I think that there's also a lot of confusion around the different types of reactions people have. And most people are only familiar with a food allergy, which also used to be incredibly rare and now is more common, as are some of these other reactions to foods. And we can get into a little bit why this is happening. But just to explain, a food allergy is when we have an immediate immune reaction to a food. That's when somebody, gets exposed to peanuts and their throat closes, or they eat strawberries and their tongue swells and they have an anaphylactic reaction. That's a strong allergy to a food. And you can test that through the blood. You can do an IgE allergy panel, or many allergists do a skin test. And so most people know their allergies because they're identified early on in life. Many people are not aware that we can also have what's called hidden food sensitivities. It's a different immune mediated reaction. So instead of an IgE molecule, it's IgG, which is delayed. So you can eat a food, and instead of having an immediate reaction, your body's going to mount an inflammatory response 1, 2, or 3 days later after that food. But if you're eating that food pretty consistently, that means you're going to be having a constant low-grade inflammatory reaction happening throughout the body. So this can also be tested through the blood. It can be done through standard labs. I find more of the specialty labs to be a lot more accurate at finding this out. And sometimes there's 1 or 2 foods. Sometimes you can identify people have a leaky gut where they are now reacting to tons of foods. Again, we can do a separate show talking about more of the gut and leaky gut and things like that. And then another reaction that people can have is a food intolerance. There's a fourth reaction that I'm going to talk about, but these are the 3 top ones that I would say create the most obvious reactions in people's bodies. And a food intolerance test is, I'm going to say, more of the original Nature Cure evaluation of how a food can have an adverse effect in the body. And a food intolerance, it's not the same immune mediated inflammatory reaction, but it creates a toxemia or a toxic reaction in the body. And what I have found in particular is that it can really, really gunk up the lymphatic system. And when our lymphatic system can't drain properly, it's like having the sewer system getting backed up. And so that can lead to a whole host of problems in the body. And when I've, just as some examples of seeing when people have removed their food intolerance, one of the most common responses is having people just lose weight without even trying. They don't have to change anything else. They just remove that one food that's creating that toxic reaction in the body. And it's like, the weight just comes off. But it can also help people with a ton of things. It can contribute to things like headaches and migraines or joint pains or other digestive issues. And I know, Dr. Tauzin, this is something you evaluate with in most of your patients. Would you like to add to this or share more about the food intolerance test or food sensitivity testing?
Absolutely. So I do this with every patient because I will tell you most doctors out there are not looking for your food intolerances. Most doctors are looking for your food sensitivities. Food intolerance is a food your body cannot digest, and so unfortunately, it's something you have to take out for life. Whereas food sensitivities happen when you have gut dysbiosis and or leaky gut. You've been taking antibiotics and killing your microbiome. You've been drinking a lot of alcohol, drinking a lot of soda, taking in a bunch of sugar and these foods and drink full of chemicals, and all this is coming into the system, and that causes high inflammation in the gut. Then the gut starts to create these sensitivities, and oftentimes it can be to foods you're eating all the time. So I find if you just take out the sensitivity, that may help temporarily, but in the long run, I don't see that helping as much as taking out that food intolerance. For me, the food intolerance is key. We get that out, and then your gut can start actually healing, and then a lot of times those food sensitivities will actually go away. So that's why I like to do the food intolerance. And like I said, most doctors are not looking for that. You have naturopaths who are looking for that. Not all naturopaths.
Naturopathic
Or
doctors.
naturopathic doctors. I know, I see naturopaths all the time. I like to shorten things. Um,
Yes,
so
I
yeah,
get
so
it.
so that naturopathic doctors are looking for that, but other doctors usually aren't. I had a lot of IBS issues, and I had weight gain from a mold exposure, and so I had these health concerns going on. And when I took out my food intolerance overnight, all of that went away. So it was almost like a miracle cure. Not saying every health issue I had went away, but the bowel issues and the weight were huge, and that's usually two big issues that people are working on. Those are really a big part of my practice.
And the reason that I interjected to say naturopathic doctor, for those of you who didn't catch the first episode, there is a difference between a naturopath and a naturopathic doctor. We often shorten it for ourselves and call us naturopaths, but to avoid confusion, because naturopaths have a different background in training. They don't go to medical school and they can't actually get the training to learn how to do food intolerance testing. And that's not to
That's
say that
true.
naturopaths can't offer beneficial guidance to people. There are many naturopaths who've still learned a lot of helpful information. It's just different. So I want to help make that distinction. So thank you for letting me interject with that. As you were talking, I was reminded too, going back to the eggs thing and even our food pyramid, where most Americans were convinced to avoid all fats and minimize protein and load up on carbs and and sugar or sugar-free items. And when we did that as a society, we also saw rates of diabetes, heart disease, and obesity go through the roof. And so that is clearly not the foundational general diet that everybody should follow. But that also led to a lot of people avoiding eggs in particular, especially because they were told it could raise cholesterol. And we went through this whole big thing in this country where people were taught to believe that cholesterol is bad and the lower the better. And there's there's a lot of false information out there around cholesterol. And we don't have to go into it too much, except to say that cholesterol is essential and we need cholesterol. And it has a lot to do more with the ratios and what's happening with your cardiovascular health more than simply just lowering cholesterol. And again, we can get into this more in another episode. But when they actually researched people eating eggs as one of the source, as a food source that has protein and fats, they never found it to raise blood cholesterol levels. So if you've been avoiding eggs because you're afraid that eating eggs will raise your cholesterol, unless you have a food sensitivity or food intolerance to eggs, they are an excellent source of protein and healthy fats. So you can feel reassured that if you have wanted to eat them and you've been avoiding them for that reason, please go ahead and eat eggs, especially if you have your own chickens or your neighbors and you have access to those type of quality eggs. So,
And I will say
yeah.
that I have been eating eggs and shrimp because I grew up in New Orleans. I've been eating eggs and shrimp my whole life, and I've never had high cholesterol. The body does not, it doesn't get cholesterol from the foods you eat. What happens is the liver creates the cholesterol, and the liver is usually creating the cholesterol when the liver's getting attacked by a lot of toxins in the system and things like that. But it's important to understand you're not getting a lot of cholesterol by eating it.
Yes. Yes. So there is a truth bomb for people. So that also gets me into the topic of wheat and gluten because this comes up a lot. And for anybody that was born before the 80s, mid 80s, this was not a household term. People did not talk about gluten before, it wasn't an issue. So let's just start with what is gluten? Because a lot of people don't even know what gluten is. Gluten is a protein and it's found predominantly in wheat, but it's also in barley, rye. It's predominantly in grains, with the highest amount of gluten being in wheat products. And gluten is made up of sort of two sub proteins. And what I want to get into is why we're seeing such an increase in a reaction to this food. Because whole wheat traditionally is a healthy grain. So, why all of a sudden are people having all of these different adverse reactions to gluten? And I know that for a while it was just a fad thing, and people were like, oh, I'm just going to go gluten free. It's healthier. It's the cool thing to avoid. There are people who have celiac disease, which is an an immune mediated reaction to gluten. Then you can also have a sensitivity to gluten, like we talked about, a hypersensitivity, or you can have a food intolerance, or your body simply cannot digest what has now happened to the grain. And it's from my perspective, it's twofold. And I will also let Dr. Tauzin jump in on this in a minute. But I want to mention that part of what's happened is they have hybridized the grain, they've changed it so that there's a higher percentage of one of the proteins. It's not the gliadin, it's a different form of the protein. I think I have it here, glutenin. And they raised it over 20%. And they did that to make the grain, to make things a little doughier or chewier. Like Americans want chewy bread, so we'll up it. But now we've upped this protein in the grain to a percentage that humans have never had to digest before. And even that alone can cause a lot of different digestive and other inflammatory reactions in the body. Then you add glyphosates. You add exposure to different pesticides, insecticides, herbicides that they say are perfectly safe for us to digest. They're just going to kill these other things. But guess what? In our gut, we have all these microbes that are there for our benefit. And if we kill those off with what we're eating, that's going to really disrupt our gut function, our immune function, our nervous system function, all of that. So we have this inundation of chemicals affecting our food. We've modified and changed the form of the grain. It shouldn't be a surprise anymore that this is harder and harder for people to digest properly. There's definitely people out there that can still tolerate wheat products, and there's a lot of people now that can't. And one way people can find out is to remove it from your diet and see how you feel. People can oftentimes be really surprised that their joint pain or their gallbladder pain just goes away, or suddenly they are pooping well when they couldn't before. You'd be amazed at how many different ways it can affect your body when you're eating something that is A, covered in poison, but specifically also the way we've changed the grain. And there's a lot of people where this is what they're reacting to. They can actually eat wheat products and gluten grains in other countries where they don't have this adverse reaction because they are having exposure to the original type of wheat and it's organic and it doesn't have that modification to the gluten protein. So that's again different from people who have other types of reactions. But I would say that in general, for the public, this is why we're seeing so many people struggling with wheat in particular. Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump on the glyphosate bandwagon here. That is a big problem for people. So a lot of people think they have a problem, they have celiacs or they can't eat gluten, when in actuality they're having a sensitivity or reaction to glyphosate. Glyphosate has been shown to cause cancer. It's not a great herbicide or pesticide that we're using. And the problem with gluten or with wheat is that you have all these farmers that have all of their crops of wheat, and there's a machine that comes around to, once it's ready to harvest, it goes from farm to farm and harvests the wheat. But if your wheat is not ready to harvest, that machine's going to skip you, and then you're not going to get your wheat harvested properly. So all these farmers are trying to get their wheat ready to be harvested at the exact time that machine's coming around because it's expensive. And so what they started doing in their practice was to start spraying the wheat down with glyphosate in order to dry out the crop and make it ready to be harvested when the machine comes around. And so they're spraying down all this wheat with glyphosate, and that's what a lot of people are reacting to, is all this glyphosate. This glyphosate is in our food supply, right? And like Dr. Wertkin said, it's killing the microbiome. So one of the things I wanted to show here, so this was a study that was done about 10 years ago, and they tested a lot of our popular foods to see how much glyphosate is in them. Because according to the law, you are allowed to have 5 parts per billion legally, 5 parts per billion in your food. And so this was an independent company that started testing how much glyphosate is actually in the food that we're eating. And they made this chart to show you. And so I just want to kind of show you what's coming into the body, right? So if you eat goldfish crackers, the goldfish crackers, and there's different ones, but the whole grain goldfish crackers have 24 parts per billion, which is way more than your 5 parts per billion, right? The original goldfish crackers have 18 parts per billion. If you're looking at Doritos, the Cool Ranch Doritos has 481 parts per billion. That is a lot of glyphosate that you're getting in your food. Fritos, 174 parts per billion. Oreos, 215 parts per billion. Little Debbie cream pies, 264. And so I wanted to show you, how this is, because people don't understand how much glyphosate they're actually getting just in these popular foods. And then this is the one. So this one is crazy. This is showing all your cereals, your Raisin Bran and your Corn Flakes. They're not under 5 parts per billion. They're 78, 82, but that's still a lot of glyphosate that shouldn't be in there. But the worst of it is in the Cheerios. Look at the Cheerios. 1,125 parts per billion. That is crazy. That is so much glyphosate. Now, who is eating the Cheerios? If you actually think about it, and in practice, who are eating these Cheerios the most, you will see it's usually little infants, right? These are the parents put these in plastic bags and take them wherever they're going so that their little infant can eat the Cheerios and be amused and not be crying and having something to chew on, right? So this is the problem. Your poor kid is getting really bad health right away with all of this glyphosate that is coming into the system. So I just wanted to show you guys that, because that is a huge piece of why we're so sick. And people don't understand that. These toxins are coming into the system. They're attacking the liver. The liver can't get them out. The glyphosate is really a big piece in why we have so much fatty liver these days, right? Fatty liver 100 years ago was only people who were alcoholics. That's who got fatty liver. And nowadays, you have all these people with fatty liver, and they have a whole new name for it. It's called non-alcoholic fatty liver, because you have these people who are don't drink and they have fatty liver. Why? Because of all this glyphosate that is in our packaged products and in our wheat and in our gluten. So
Yes.
understanding that this is a huge piece of why we're so sick.
Yes. And I love that you showed that too. And I think it's wild how so many of us have thought those are healthier options. Even
Yeah.
seeing it's not as bad, but even looking at the high amount in Honey Nut Cheerios or Kashi products and things that one would think, oh, this is a relatively healthy choice. Relative being being a good word in that
Exactly.
situation. And when
Exactly.
we talk about eating organic, some people already are on that bandwagon, they know. Other people look at organic and they think it's just more expensive. And I don't want to have to spend the money on it. And what many
Mhm.
people don't realize is you end up paying for it through your health and your health care. That's where the cost shows up. It's really, really worth it to choose to eat clean whenever possible to really minimize the toxic burden because we're all inundated with chemicals and toxins. And I guess we'll do a whole episode on
We
environmental
will.
toxicity because this is a big topic. But this is also huge. What you're putting in your body every day makes a huge difference and it accumulates. So it really, really, really matters. And I want to mention for those of you listening who don't eat organic and are concerned about pricing, one option just to start out with is to go to ewg.org. It's the Environmental Working Group website, www.ewg.org. I have no affiliation with them, but they have this great free resource where you can print out a wallet size card and they list for you the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. This is produce, fruits, and vegetables that are highest and lowest in pesticide content. I think they all have it, but the ones that are in the Clean 15 are the produce that absorb less of those chemicals, where the Dirty Dozen, which is predominantly fruit, by the way, also has some of the highest rates. So you can use that as a resource when you're shopping to go, oh, okay, if I can only limit my organic, let me choose the things that are on the Dirty Dozen list and make sure I get those organic. Oh, an even bigger problem for people who are not aware that we recently had the president sign in a new law to protect the chemical companies. And I do want to back up for a minute to share with people that there's a pharmaceutical company called Bayer, Bayer. And one of the sections of medications that they make are for treating cancer. They have a whole line of cancer drugs that they make. And they decided to buy out Monsanto and bridge that under their company. And when people like myself started speaking out about this and saying, oh my gosh, this pharmaceutical company is buying a chemical company, this is insane. And the response, people would
Mhm.
be like, that's a conspiracy theory. It's not a theory. It might be a conspiracy, but it's not a
Fact.
theory. It's a fact. This happened. And glyphosates are known to cause cancer among many other problems. They can cause all kinds of respiratory problems, cardiovascular problems, kidney problems, a lot of cancers, in particularly lymphatic and blood cancers, but the list can go on. So Bayer, having acquired this company, has also now, and since it acquired it, has been getting sued a lot, and they've had to pay out millions and millions of dollars in lawsuits for harming and killing people. And they also, even when Monsanto started out with the company that created glyphosates in particular, they had a way of convincing farmers that this was something really worth investing in. This would help farmers produce a lot more food faster, which should really help, beat hunger and help them make more money. But what they did is they made farms dependent on their product. And so what happened recently is the I'm going to say Bayer in particular, this drug slash chemical company said, we're getting sued so much that we're going to just go ahead and now pull this unless you give us immunity. unless you say we will stop being sued for harming and killing people, we're going to pull this. And so it put the government in a very uncomfortable position where they had to make a choice, because if it suddenly gets pulled, that's going to be very damaging to those farms and farmers. That's going to really disrupt, you know, our food production in this country. And also some of the components of these chemicals, I think phosphorus in particular, is used by the military. So what they did is they said, okay, for national security purposes, we are now going to provide legal protection for this. But that also means ongoing use of this very known toxic chemical that is harmful to the farmers using it and then harmful to all the people consuming it. Washing your food does not wash off those chemicals that have
No.
gotten absorbed into that food. In addition to it also destroying the soil, which is also destroying our planet and adding to some of the climate changes that we're seeing, but that's a whole other thing. I won't digress too far into that. And I know there's a lot of people out there who are aware of this, and they're very angry at the Maha Group and RFK Jr. because they know that RFK Jr. knows how damaging these chemicals are and how important it is that we start shifting over to more and more organic and regenerative farms so that we can restore health to the planet and to the soil and to the quality of the food that we're eating. And I want to mention that something similar to this happened in the 80s, in 1986 specifically. A different law was passed to provide similar liability to the drug companies. And this came about because there was a specific drug being manufactured by several pharmaceutical companies, and they were getting sued for harming and killing children in particular, but also adults. And they were literally going bankrupt from being sued. And so they said, we're going to stop making this drug because not only are we not profiting, we're going bankrupt. And the government said, oh, no, 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 no. We want you to keep making this drug. So we will just provide legal protection so that nobody can sue you for your product harming and killing them. And I just want to highlight that we've our government has created this legal protection for a drug that they know harms and kills people. And now they've done the same thing for a chemical company that is saturating the majority of food that Americans are being exposed to. This means, again, just to be clear, they know that these products harm and kill people. And rather than siding with the safety and benefits to the American people, they've chosen to side with these other companies and said, okay, we'll just keep using it. And this way, and this, allows you to be protected so you can keep your money and people can't sue you. This is a
Yeah.
really, really big problem. And if you are not angry about this, I hope that this show has solicited a little bit of anger about this because it's really outrageous what is
It's
happening.
very
And it always
outrageous.
comes down to we, the people, paying the price for this. And I think that the knowledge of what's happening is a really, really crucial step in us being able to make more positive changes for our health, for all of us and the planet.
Absolutely. And I do want to add in here, um, there is a test for glyphosate. There's
Yes.
a urine test that you can actually take. You send in your urine and they can tell you how much glyphosate is in your urine. So you can see how much you're actually being exposed to. I used to live overseas and where they don't even use glyphosate. And I eat a lot of organic and I had minimal glyphosate in my body, but I still had some. So I was still getting it, even though I was in another country that doesn't use it.
Yes. Wow.
So that happens all the time. But yeah, you can check it if you're concerned about how much glyphosate you're actually getting in the system. You can check it with urine, and you can come to see one of us to order that test for you. But I do want to get a little bit back to the diet portion here.
Ooh,
Um,
before we do, can I just interject one thing about that? Because you just reminded me, which is that I've also had patients who are eating all organic, but they live near farms that are using it, and that
Yeah.
the wind carries it. And I've tested it a lot when people are being treated for, or they are recently diagnosed with cancers, and we find a huge correlation there. And I want to
Mm,
also mention a huge correlation
good
between
point.
glyphosate exposure and chronic Lyme disease. When, and again, we could do a whole episode on Lyme disease, but in the areas where it's most active, where people tend to be, where it's really endemic, they have such high rates of glyphosate use. And it's astounding, where I've done urine testing, and the same companies can test you for other chemicals as well. And there can be, in addition to
Uh-huh.
glyphosate, there's similar chemicals used also as herbicides and insecticides and pesticides. And I am blown away sometimes by the excessive levels in people's bodies and how much better they feel when they clean up their diet and we're able to detox them from these chemicals. So it's not just on the level of, oh, it's better to eat clean. This really truly translates to the difference between being healthy and trying to manage or live with a chronic disease. So I
Yeah.
know we did get off track a little bit with diet, but I would say if there's one diet approach that I encourage people is to try to eat as clean as possible, as far as choosing organic as much as possible. And when you're buying produce, trying as much as you can to get it from regenerative farms, especially locally if possible. The same goes to, with animal protein as well, really trying to eat your free range, your grass fed,
Yeah.
and another thing we can tap into. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to go off on this other quick little tangent that relates to organic, because there's a lot of confusion about organic and non-GMO. And so I just want to address that really quickly to say they are not the same thing. If a food is organic, it can't be GMO, and that has to do with genetically modifying or genetically modified organisms. So if it's organic, it's going to be non-GMO, but non-GMO does not mean it's organic, right? And that's different from hybridizing. So there's all these different ways that we have been modifying our food. And it's unfortunate, because I would say that the way our food is naturally created is going to be the best way for us to digest and assimilate all those necessary nutrients. But sometimes we come along and we like to play God and go, oh, you know what if we genetically modify this so it's more resistant to pests? And that sounds great, but then we don't think about what the long-term consequences are when we make those modifications. So it doesn't mean that all GMO products are necessarily bad or harmful, but I do think it is quite concerning to be consuming foods on a regular basis that have been genetically modified. What is that doing to our genes in the body? I think I could go on more on this topic, but is there anything you want to add related
Yeah,
to that?
I just wanna make sure everybody knows. So, yes, diet is individualized, and you wanna figure out what's right for you, but what you can do without taking food intolerance testing or sensitivity, you can get all the junk food out that's got all these chemicals in it and all this glyphosate in it. You can eat a clean diet, you can eat unprocessed foods, and you can eat seasonally, right? Eating with the seasons is a huge piece that I don't think a lot of people realize, but we have fruits all year round because we import them, right? But if you like we live in Colorado, where we get winter and it's snowy and we don't go out in the sun during the winter. And so you don't want to be eating a lot of fruits at that point. You want to be eating what's locally grown for that time period, right? So you want to be eating more squashes and sweet potatoes and apples and more things in the fall and winter that can grow in that environment. Of course, if you're living in Costa Rica in the winter and you've got nonstop sun and you're outside all the time, yeah, then you want to have smoothies and fruits all day, right? That's great. But understanding that, because I think that's a big piece. But those are some easy things people can get started with if you want to take some first steps to cleaning up the diet and getting yourself into better health. I've seen some people just take out the junk food and all the candy and the McDonald's, and just taking that out can be a huge can cause huge improvements to your health, just doing those little bits. But if you really want to figure out what diet's right for you, definitely see a practitioner who can say, okay, you shouldn't be eating dairy, or you shouldn't be eating fruit, or you shouldn't be eating potato, right? Only practitioners are really going to be able to give you specifics for that.
Yes. And I love that you mentioned the eating local and eating seasonally. I think that's something I encourage a lot of people to get to eventually. There's usually a lot of other steps people need to make before then, but it is amazing how much better people can feel and their digestion can work when that happens, when you eat the foods that are naturally grown in your part of the world. And that's most people don't even consider that, right? Because our grocery stores are full with foods from all over the world. And one of the fruits that I used to struggle with that I see come up a lot are bananas, because bananas
Yep.
are great. They're great in smoothies, they're great in cereal, la, la, la. And we can always get them that we want to eat them year round. But it really is a tropical fruit that, just like Dr. Tauzin was saying, is going to do best during our warmer months, or if you're living somewhere tropical where that makes sense. Otherwise, it can start to have an effect on the body that starts to pull the body a little bit out of balance. Not in a way where it's
Yeah.
going to give you a disease, but it's just going to be one more thing contributing. And that's not to say that you should never eat bananas in the winter, but just as something to really consider. And as a random diet thing that came to mind is how often people think salmon is a healthy food to eat.
Oh,
And it can be, but again, it really depends on the source and how your body responds. Salmon can be inflammatory for some people, but especially if it's farm raised salmon, what many people don't know is that salmon can also be genetically modified to get the fish to grow faster. And they are grown in very poor, unnatural conditions for them, to the point where they also have to inject them with a dye to give them that pink color. And this just is not
ugh.
good. And so
No,
I
it's not
get it.
good.
It gets so confusing. He's like, I thought salmon was good. Well, if it was real salmon, potentially, yes. Right? And I mean, that can also get into looking at seafood and which seafoods are highest in mercury, and, the
Mm-hmm.
heavy metals is a big thing. So you can also find resources for that. But that adds to the confusion, because just like wheat, which used to be considered a health food, the more we manipulate and change everything about the food, the less healthy it actually becomes to our bodies. But the more we can get back to real food and the way nature intended food to be, then it actually can be healthy and good for your body.
For sure. And I want to add in about fats too.
Yes.
And there's a lot of information about fats out there. Don't eat seed oils, eat only the, right? And understand that there's fats that are cold pressed. So they're basically just squeezed out. And then there's a lot of fats that go through processing. And when they go through processing, they're treated with chemicals, with hexanes and different solvents. And that's what screws up the fats, right? It's how they're treated to get extracted. And so you end up with these oils that are not good for your body. Now, you need fat in the diet. Your body is made up of a lot of fat, especially your brain, right? We need fat in the diet. Um, Although there are some diets that do no fat.
And sometimes you do need it.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
and sometimes you need to have no fat to heal. But fats. So you got to understand with fats, these like the trans fats and the vegetable oils, the canola oils. Those are treated and extracted with chemicals that make them really bad, and they are rancid. And when you put them in your body cells your body cells die and you make new ones. And now they have to get new fat to make that cell, right? Where's it getting the fat from? From what you're eating. So if you're just eating a diet full of these trans fats and these vegetable fats and canola oil, your body is now going to be, these cells are going to be made with these rigid, nasty fats that are going to cause dysfunction in your cells because these fats aren't nice, flexible fats. And so that is a big problem. So your diet cannot consist of a lot of fried foods and these other fats. You want to eat good fats that have also that you can get to a good good heat point to actually cook your food if you are using them in that way. More fats like coconut oil and
Oil,
olive oil. Yeah, olive oil.
butter.
Well, olive oil you don't want to heat high, but yeah, even butter. Those are such better fats than these other fats. I just wanted to get into too about intermittent fasting because I know so many people do intermittent fasting, and I see so many people doing it wrong. So
Yes.
please understand, you have all these influencers, people telling you intermittent fast and skip breakfast and then eat later, and that is such a horrible thing to do. When you skip breakfast, and a lot of people skip breakfast because they're not hungry, and that's usually indicating that there's a health issue here, a health issue in your gut, health issue with cortisol. Most people, I'm not hungry in the morning, I'm going to skip breakfast and I'm going to eat later. With the studies that actually looked at the benefit of intermittent fasting, when they look at when you skip breakfast, you don't get the same results. You don't get that balanced blood sugar. You don't get the good weight loss. You do see that when you skip the dinner. If you are doing the intermittent fasting, you can do it in a healthy way, but please don't do it wrong and skip breakfast. Skip dinner instead.
Yes, there's a reason we call it breakfast break fast. Hee hee. Right? So it really is ideal to do that overnight. And I just want to tack on to that because we have also it's become normal to not eat breakfast at this point, and intermittent fasting, just like you were saying, is makes it a good valid excuse. So I'm doing intermittent fasting, and many people will say when they do it, they feel great doing it. And that could be in part because they know if they eat, they'll get bloated and they don't want to get bloated. So they'll feel better that
Yeah.
way. Or, and I've heard of other naturopathic doctors telling people, yep, just have coffee in the morning and don't eat. And
Mm,
that makes me
with
so
butter.
uncomfortable. Yeah. But there is also this element emotionally where people can often be suppressing their stress and emotional distress. And that also adds to a feeling of like, I just can't eat in the morning. And so they just don't. And like, I just eat later in the day. And they're like, that's just what works for me. And I want to mention that it also can be this indication that you're holding on to a lot of emotional stress. And once that is addressed, you can restore a normal hunger in the morning and save the intermittent fasting for the evening through the night, and then starting your day with the right thing. And what that right thing is really depends on what season we're in during the year and what's going
Yes.
on with your body, because some people are going to do great with fruit first thing, other people might need protein first thing, right? It really
Mm-hmm.
does depend, as I think we're making that point over and over pretty clear, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then there's a different kind of fasting, but before I get into that, did you want to mention something else
Yeah,
related
I
to?
wanted to mention too, when you do intermittent fasting, you're looking to push autophagy. And autophagy happens when you're sleeping, right? So that's really why also you want to do the skipping the dinner, because that's going to push more of the autophagy at night, which is what you're trying to do with the intermittent fasting.
It's allowing your body it starts stimulating processes in the body for it to start cleaning things out. It starts reducing inflammation. In a sense, your body can start, instead of focusing on digestion, it's focusing on cleaning up all the other things. And really, the longer people can stay in that state, the greater benefit they're going to have. And this has also been researched and documented, where you can see measurable changes, a reduction in inflammatory markers, a spike in immune and positive immune reactions in the body, reductions in different imbalances, let's say with blood sugar regulation and other things. The benefits are so profound. And of course, I have to add that fasting is not right for everybody. It really
Yes.
depends on what's going on with your body and what you're doing in your life. This is not like a keep working a 50-hour work week while fasting. That is a very bad idea. Please don't do that. But with people who have certain chronic illnesses, ranging from various autoimmune conditions to very serious um, depleted immune conditions, when people are able to do a minimum of a 3-day water fast or juice fast, it can have such profound healing effects on the body. It takes not only a huge burden off of the GI tract, but really all of those other changes on a cellular level that help the bodies to start restoring a healthy, balanced, normal structure and function. It's amazing. So if it's something that you've not tried, but you're interested in learning more about or exploring, I'm going to also recommend finding somebody knowledgeable to work with. Please don't use Google or social media as your resource because it's often missing really key information about how to prepare the body for a fast, how to safely go through a fast, and how to come out of a fast. There's several phases to it. Um, but it's really, it's kind of the opposite of talking about diet is the not eating, but it really
True.
can. And, but knowing when and how to do that can be extraordinary. And some people they start intermittent, then they might go to a 24-hour and they just do one day
Mhm.
a week for a while and they work their way up. Some people even go to facilities. There are inpatient facilities too, where you can go and fast for 1 week or longer. So you have that guidance and supervision and other ways to help you with hydration. There are options there, but when it's indicated, can be so profoundly beneficial for the body.
Absolutely, and cleansing too. There's many cleanses that you do eat or you do juicing or you do vegetarian eating or different things. And I see so many people jumping to do a cleanse and there's so much misinformation out there and then they don't know how to do it. And so people often they waste a lot of money and you can hurt yourself. I do a cleanse or detox at least twice a year every year and I've been doing that for since I've been in school, and I've made a bunch of mistakes on my own, and I know what to do. Sometimes I think you just have to learn the hard way. But yeah, so even be careful of that. Just go and grab these kits and these cleanses off the shelf, not knowing what you're doing. I work a lot with people and I teach them how to cleanse properly, and we see amazing results because we do it properly, right? But yeah, if you're just going to buy some juices and just going to jump into drinking a bunch of juices, a lot of people end up feeling really bad doing that. So definitely get with somebody who knows what they're doing and learn how to do this properly, because this can be a really important part of maintaining good health doing a cleanse every year. And again, it doesn't have to be water fasting. It can be, there's so many different ones out there. And don't just jump into the liver one where you're drinking a bunch of salt and oil. Because I see so many
Oh,
people doing that.
oh,
It's terrible. You don't want to push your liver when it's not ready uh, to
yes.
do that.
There's a time
To
and a
do
place
that,
to do a liver gallbladder flush. And again, you want to have
Yes.
the guidance and you want to know when it's safe. There are so
Yeah,
many different types of detoxes, cleansing diets, all kinds of things. So I think we should just do a whole episode
we
on
will.
that
We'll get
topic
into
because
that.
it's a big
Yeah,
one. And
yeah.
somehow this also reminded me, and it's not even related to fasting. But I wanted to mention the anti-inflammatory diet because that one comes up a lot and it can be
Mm-hmm.
very beneficial. The anti-inflammatory diet basically means you're avoiding the top foods that tend to be the most inflammatory. And that can include, wheat and dairy and sugar and might include eggs. It might include also the nightshades and things like tomatoes
Uh-huh.
or eggplant, potato, citrus. And what I've seen, and the reason I'm bringing this up is when people learn about it, they just adopt that diet and then they never change it. And the
Mm.
purpose of doing the diet is to see, is there one or more of these foods that is contributing to your symptoms? And then you still need to get to the underlying aspects of what's creating an inflammatory condition. It shouldn't be something you have to avoid forever. It can be a short term to lower the inflammation, to give you some information, but it's not necessarily a diet that you need to stay on for the rest of your life. And again, it also depends if you are somebody who's not sensitive or intolerant or allergic to wheat, and you can eat that. And especially if you're getting good organic, then that's fine. It can just be a very useful diet to understand short term a way that you can lower that inflammatory burden on your body, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a long term diet. just like all these other diets that we've talked about. They can all be used short term for various benefits. They don't necessarily need to be the diet for you to stay on. Ultimately, getting to a balanced diet is going to be the best long term as a general. So, to be clear, there is no
Yeah,
one diet that is right for everyone. Every diet has its benefits and its purposes. And it's really about learning what is right for your body at this time and then what's going to be right for your body long term. Anything
absolutely.
else on that note, or should we kind of wrap it up
Yes,
somewhat?
we can go on and on about this topic. There's so many things to say.
So, thanks for joining us today. And remember to keep listening to your body. And if you're not sure how to do that, keep listening to this show. And if you are interested in finding me and scheduling a consultation, you are welcome to visit my website, which is avivawertkin.com.
And I can be found at denvervitalistmedicine.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and all the fun places. So, yeah, I hope this episode challenged you and taught you something. So, take what resonated with you and question what didn't. And remember, your body is always working for you, even if it doesn't feel that way. So, thanks for joining us on Truth Bombs and Tinctures. Trust your body, honor your nature, and keep choosing health.
All right. See you next time.